Hello, my friends. Welcome back for another reading of a chapter from Sarah Plain and Tall. I don't know about you, but when I get into a good book, it's really, really hard for me to stop at one chapter. So I don't know exactly if I'm going to be able to stop at the end of chapter 6. I may just do chapter 6 and 7 together. I can't make any promises. But I just realized I forgot to ask you the questions from chapter 5. So here we go. Chapter 5 questions. Why do you think Sarah names the sheep after her aunts? That's question number 1. Number 2, what do we learn about Sarah's personality in chapter 5, the one that we just read before? Number 3, why does Sarah draw pictures to send home? Why do you think that she does that? Number 4, what does Sarah enjoy doing on the farm? And number 5, when Sarah says, our dune, why do you think Caleb gets excited? Remember, press pause so that you can talk about these questions. And then when you're ready to hear the answers, go ahead and press play again. So let's see. Number 1 was, why do you think Sarah names the sheep after her aunts? Well, we don't really know. So really any answer that you can come up with is probably right. Maybe she misses them. Maybe because she loves them. Maybe because she just wants to have a reminder of them because she's not really going to see them for a long, long time because they're back in Maine where she came from. What do we learn about her personality? Well, she's definitely not a scaredy cat because she went up on the high dune made of hay, right? And she loved it. So she's not afraid, but she is adventurous. Number 3, why does Sarah draw pictures to send them home? Well, these answers can be very different. I think maybe my guess would be she wanted to show the people at home what it looks like in Kansas and how different it is. And it's one thing to try to explain it in words. It's another thing to be able to show them in pictures. And remember, this is a long, long time ago, over 100 years ago, and people did not have cameras. They could not just take a picture and send it home. So the only way they could do it is to draw. So that's what she did. Number 4, what does Sarah enjoy doing on the farm? Well, she enjoyed playing with the sheep. She enjoyed drawing pictures of the land, and she definitely enjoyed jumping in that hay, right? And the last question is, when Sarah says our dune, why does Caleb get excited? Because when she says our dune, that means that she's starting to feel like she is part of the family. And she feels like this hay dune now belongs to all of them together, including herself. And that makes them super excited. Okay, ready for chapter 6? Here we go. The days grew longer. The cows moved close to the pond where the water was cool and there were trees. Papa taught Sarah how to plow the fields, guiding the plow behind Jack and old Bess, the reins around her neck. When the chores were done, we sat in the meadow with the sheep, Sarah beside us, watching Papa finish. Tell me about the winter, said Sarah. Old Bess nodded her head as she walked, but we could hear Papa speak sharply to Jack. Jack doesn't like work, said Caleb. He wants to be here in the sweet grass with us. I don't blame him, said Sarah. She lay back in the grass with her arms under her head. Tell me about winter, she said again. Winter is cold here, said Caleb, and Sarah and I laughed. Winter is cold everywhere, I said. We go to school in winter, said Caleb. Sums and writing and books, he sang. I am good at sums and writing, said Sarah. I love books. How do you get to school? Well, Papa drives us in the wagon, or we walk 3 miles when there is not too much snow. Sarah sat up. Do you have lots of snow? Lots and lots and lots of snow, chanted Caleb, rolling around in the grass. Sometimes we have to dig our way out to feed the animals. In Maine, the barns are attached to the houses sometimes, said Sarah. Caleb grinned. So you could have a cow over to Sunday supper? Sarah and I laughed. When there are bad storms, Papa ties a rope from the house to the barn so that no one will get lost, said Caleb. I frowned. I love winter. There is ice on the windows on winter mornings, I told Sarah. We can draw sparkling pictures and we can see our breath in the air. Papa builds a warm fire and we bake hot biscuits and put on hundreds of sweaters. And if the snow is too high, we stay home from school and make snow people. Sarah lay back in the tall grasses again. Her face was nearly hidden. And is there wind? She asked. Do you like wind? Asked Caleb. There is wind by the sea. There is wind here too, said Caleb happily. It blows the snow and brings tumbleweeds and makes the sheep run. Wind and wind and wind. Caleb stood up and ran like the wind, and the sheep ran after him. Sarah and I watched him jump over rocks and gullies, the sheep behind him, stiff-legged and fast. He circled the field, the sun making the top of his hair golden. He collapsed next to Sarah, and the lambs pushed their wet noses into us. Hello, Lou, Sarah said, smiling. Hello, Maddie. The sun rose higher, and Papa stood to take off his hat and wipe his face with his sleeve. I'm hot, said Sarah. I can't wait for winter, the winter wind. Let's swim. Swim? Here? I asked her. I can't swim, said Caleb. Can't swim, exclaimed Sarah. I'll teach you in the cow pond. That's for the cows, I cried. But Sarah had grabbed our hands and we were running through the fields, ducking under the fence into the far pond. Shoo, cows, shoo, said Sarah as the cows looked up startled. She took off her dress and waded into the water in her petticoat. She dived suddenly and disappeared for a moment as Caleb and I watched, and she came up laughing, her hair streaming free. Water beads sat on her shoulders. She tried to teach us how to float, but I sank like a bucket filled with water and came up sputtering. But Caleb lay on his back and learned how to blow streams of water high up in the air like a whale. The cows stood on the banks of the pond and stared at us and stopped their chewing. Water bugs circled us. Is this like the sea? Asked Caleb. Sarah treaded water. The sea is salt, said Sarah. It stretches out as far as you can see. It gleams like the sun on a glass. There are waves. Like this? Asked Caleb, and he pushed a wave at Sarah that made her cough and laugh. Yes, she said, like that. I held my breath and floated at last, looking up into the sky, afraid to speak. Crows flew over, 3 in a row, and I could hear a killdeer in the field. We climbed the bank and dried ourselves and lay in the grass again. The cows watched. Their eyes were sad in their dinner plate faces, and I slept, dreaming a perfect dream, that fields had turned into a sea that gleamed like sun on glass, and Sarah was happy. Chapter 7. The dandelions in the fields had gone by, their heads soft as feathers. The summer roses were opening. Our neighbors Matthew and Maggie came to help Papa plow the field for corn. Sarah stood with us on the porch, watching their wagon wind up the road, 2 horses pulling it and 1 tied in the back. I remember the last time that we had stood there, Caleb and I. We were waiting for Sarah. Sarah's hair was in thick braids that circled her head and wild daisies tucked in here and there. Papa had picked them for her. Old Bess and Jack ran along the inside of the fence, whickering at the new horses. Papa needs 5 horses for the big gang plow, Caleb told Sarah. Prairie grass is hard. Matthew and Maggie came with their 2 children and a sack full of chickens. Maggie emptied the sack into the yard, and 3 red banty chickens clucked and scattered. They are for you, she told Sarah, for eating. Sarah loved the chickens. She clucked back to them and fed them grain. They followed her, shuffling and scratching primly in the dirt. I knew they would not be for eating. The children were young and named Rose and Violet after flowers. They hooted and laughed and chased the chickens, who flew up to the porch roof, then the dogs, who crept quietly under the porch. Seal had long ago fled into the barn to sleep in the cool hay. Sarah and Maggie helped hitch the horses to the plow. Then they set up a big table in the shade of the barn, covering it with a quilt and kettle of flowers in the middle. They sat on the porch while Caleb and Matthew and Papa began their morning of plowing. I mixed biscuit dough just inside the door, watching. You are lonely, yes? Asked Maggie in her soft voice. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Slowly, I stirred the dough. Maggie reached over and took Sarah's hand. I miss the hills of Tennessee sometimes, she said. Do not miss the hills, Maggie, I thought. I miss the sea, said Sarah. Do not miss the hills, do not miss the sea. I stirred and I stirred the dough. I miss my brother William, said Sarah, but he is married. The house is hers now, not mine any longer. And there are 3 old aunts who all squawk together like crows at dawn. I miss them too. There are always things to miss, said Maggie, no matter where you are. I looked out and saw Papa and Matthew and Caleb working. Rose and Violet ran in the fields. I felt something brush my legs and looked down at Nick, wagging his tail. I would miss you, Nick, I whispered. I would. I knelt down and scratched his ears. I miss Mama. I nearly forgot, said Maggie on the porch. I have something for you. I carried the bowl outside and watched Maggie lift the low wooden box out of the wagon. Plants, she said to Sarah, for your garden. My garden? Said Sarah. She bent down to touch them plants. Zinnias and marigolds and wild feverfew, said Maggie. You must have a garden wherever you are. Sarah smiled. I had a garden in Maine with dahlias and columbine and nasturtiums the color of the sun when it sets. Now, I don't know if nasturtiums would grow here. Try, said Maggie. You must have a garden. We planted the flowers by the porch, turning over the soil and patting it around them and watering. Lottie and Nick came to sniff, and the chickens walked in the dirt, leaving prints. In the fields, the horses pulled the plow up and down under the hot summer sun. Maggie wiped her face, leaving a streak of dirt. Soon you can drive your wagon over to my house, and I will give you more. I have Tansy. Sarah frowned. Oh, I have never driven a wagon before. I can teach you, said Maggie, and so can Anna and Caleb and Jacob. Sarah turned to me. Can you? She asked. Can you drive a wagon? I nodded. And Caleb too? Yes. In Maine, said Sarah, I would just walk into town. Here it is different, said Maggie. Here you will drive. Way off in the sky, clouds gathered. Matthew and Papa and Caleb came in from the fields. Their work was done, and we all ate in the shade. We are glad you are here, said Matthew to Sarah, a new friend. Maggie misses her friends sometimes. Sarah nodded. There's always something to miss, no matter where you are. She smiled and looked at Maggie. Rose and Violet fell asleep in the grass, their bellies so full of meat and greens and biscuits. And then it was time to go. Papa and Matthew lifted them into the wagon to sleep on blankets. Sarah walked slowly behind the wagon for a long time, waving and watching it disappear. Caleb and I ran to bring her back, and the chickens were running wildly behind us. What shall we name them? Asked Sarah, laughing as the chickens followed us into the house. I smiled. I was right. These chickens would not be for eating. And then Papa came just before the rain, bringing Sarah the first roses of summer. And believe it or not, that is the end of chapter 7. So let's enjoy our questions for chapter 6 and chapter 7. Let's see here. Ooh, why does Sarah ask about the winter? Why do you think that she asks about the winter? Number 2, why do you think Papa teaches Sarah how to plow a field? And number 3, how do Caleb and Anna describe the winter to Sarah? Do you remember what they say? Okay, now ready for the answers? Here we go. Sarah, why does she ask about the winter? Well, it seems like she wants to know what it's going to be like. She's trying to decide if she wants to live there with them, remember? And maybe she wants to compare it with the winters that she knew in Maine. Why do you think Papa teaches Sarah how to plow the field? Well, that's something that Sarah's going to have to help with, because back in the day, and even now, if you have a farming family, the whole family has to work together. Not one person can do it all by themselves. And so everybody in the family had to help. The mom, the dad, and the brothers and sisters, and everybody. They were like one big team. So he taught her to see if she would be able to do that kind of work if she decides to stay. And number 3, how do Caleb and Anna describe the winter to Sarah? Well, they tell her that it's cold and that there's lots of snow, and then that the wind blows and that the sheep get scared, and about the frost on the window panes, that you can draw pictures, and how you can see your breath in the wind. And they also say that that's when they go to school. And that sounds kind of funny to us, because we go to school all the year, even when it's hot, when it's cold, all the time. But it seems like there, because there were farming families, the children would have to be home when it was time to do farm work. And in the winter, since it's cold and you can't do any farm work, that's when the children would get to go to school. Because remember I said about farming families, they all have to work together. They can't do it by themselves. Everybody has to pitch in a little bit. Okay, so let's find the questions for chapter 7. Where's the questions for chapter 7? Come on. Aha. Why do Matthew and Maggie come to visit? Do you remember why they came over? Number 2, how does Anna know that the chickens will not be for eating? Number 3, what are some of the chores that the family members do on the farm? How do you describe the environment in Kansas? How would you describe Kansas when they lived there on the prairie? Why do Sarah's eyes fill with tears when she is talking with Maggie? Do you remember she was feeling kind of sad? Why was she so sad? And what does Sarah want Anna to teach her? That's question number 7. And number 8, what does Papa bring to Sarah at the end of the chapter? Do you remember? What does he bring for Sarah at the end of the chapter, just as it was starting to rain outside? Okay, Maggie and Matthew come over because they need to help Papa to plow the big, large field and get it ready for corn, remember? And they bring in extra horses because they didn't have a tractor. They didn't have all those machinery, so they had to do it with horses. Anna knows that the chickens will not be for eating because Sarah gave them names. And usually when you give an animal a name and you get attached to them, then you're not really going to eat them. It's more like a pet than an animal that you're going to eat. What are some of the chores that the family members do on the farm? Well, there's plowing, there's cooking, there's cleaning the stalls, taking care of the animals, gardening, and then of course cleaning. No matter where we live, we're going to have to clean. How would you describe the environment in Kansas? Well, sounds like there's lots of flowers that can grow there. Sounds like there was a lot of grass because they were sitting in the tall grasses. We saw the big blue sky. We saw that some clouds were coming in. Seems like it's very hot in the winter. Why do Sarah's eyes fill with tears when she's talking to Maggie? Well, she's remembering all of the things and people that she misses in Maine, like her brother, her aunts, and she feels a little bit sad because she misses them. Maggie brings a gift to Sarah. Oh, she brings Sarah plants for her garden. Those flowers are going to help to make the house look prettier and to make it feel more like a home for Sarah. What does Sarah want Anna to teach her? She wants Anna to teach her how to drive a wagon. And what does Papa bring to Sarah? He brings her the first summer roses. All right, see you guys next time.